Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Deb?
Apologies from Councillor Watling.
Thank you very much. I think it'll be noted. Declarations of interest. None. The minutes of the meeting on the 13th of September. Moved?
Move them.
Thank you. I'll just sign those. First item on the agenda is a verbal update in respect of the overnight closure threat to the Princess Royal Hospital. This council has worked incredibly hard over the last few weeks and few years to safeguard services at the Princess Royal Hospital. This morning, hosted by Councillor Raj Mehta, I met the Indian consulate in Birmingham to appeal to him directly to support Shropshire and Telford Wrekin in their hour of need by helping us recruit middle grade doctors. That conversation, that meeting was very, very positive, and we have an action plan over the next 24 hours to raise the profile of this need in some of the largest hospitals in India. There's also been a number of conversations with the Indian consulate about organisational neighbouring and twinning, which will help in the medium to long term. However, one of the issues that will face us is, even if we are able to identify doctors from India, this government's hostile environment to immigration and the issuing of visas is really taken its toll upon the reputation of this country as being a welcoming place to work. Since 2010, there's been a near halving of doctors coming from India to work within our NHS. When Indian doctors can get visas, which is very difficult, those visas are only for 2 years. So we are asking Indian doctors to come and to work in our NHS with a certainty of only 2 years that they will be able to stay here to work. If you contrast that to America, where Indian doctors can earn more money than here, they are also able to work unlimited number of years in America, and similarly can be said for Australia. I think that's a damning indictment of the government's policy to Commonwealth citizens, and something that I'm sure our local apologists for this government will no doubt try and defend. However, for me, it's something that we should be morally ashamed of. We are also lobbying hard with NHS education to secure junior doctors and training doctors places, which again is a difficult ask. Since 2010, the number of training places available for doctors has been reduced by 50%. 50%. but it's therefore really difficult to obtain doctors. I'm sure that the apologists for this government in this county will have an excuse for that, but the reality is that it is something that can't be defended. One of the things that I am most really concerned about is that the Health Secretary himself was in Birmingham only a couple of weeks ago, and the only commitment that we could be arrived at from the Health Secretary is a promise that he would monitor the situation. Well, the time for monitoring has gone. This council has been warning for quite some time about the issues around Sath and the Princess Royal Hospital in particular, and the dangers of an overnight closure. And those warnings have been treated with contempt. We have been accused of scaremongering, and even the chief executive of Wolverhampton Hospital Trust himself has said that this issue has been coming for the last 2 years. Why on earth has this government been asleep at the wheel when it comes to our hospital trust, and the representatives of this government in this county being asleep at the wheel? Again, I'm sure that apologists for this government in this county will have an excuse, but for me, it's indefensible. We will rally our communities around this, and we will fight this every step of the way. Over 22,000 people have signed a petition created by this council, the biggest ever council campaign ever. And that has gained the support of members of Parliament right across the West Midlands of all political parties. And I do hope that Conservatives in Telford Wrekin will join Conservative MPs in backing our cause for a government-backed rescue plan. We will have a march, and I have asked people from all political parties to... Andrew Eade laughs at the suggestion of a march that he couldn't be bothered to turn up last time for. Well, our community... No, Andrew, I'm talking.
You said
no.
Hang on, there's a camera there.
Yes.
In what way did I laugh at what you just said?
You just sniggered.
Nonsense.
Okay, it was a matter for the tape. If it's on you, it'll be shown.
Try and pull yourself together, Sean.
No, Andrew.
Dear.
No. This is not a laughing matter. We will bring our community together to demonstrate the need for a overnight A&E for our town. The 80 children on average a month that will be diverted away from the Princess Royal Hospital could easily be my son. It could easily be members of your own family. And what I will do, and what this cabinet will do, is everything in our power to stop this overnight closure. And if we can't stop it, I will ensure, and this cabinet will ensure, that when we look ourselves in the mirror, we can say that we tried our very best to stop that overnight closure. So God forbid, if anything happens to any one of our residents in Telford Wrekin or Shropshire, then it is not in our name. And I think, and I appeal to everybody in this county who has any influence at all to stop this overnight closure from happening, to do so now. Yeah. The calls for special measures for the trust is a label at all. Special measures will not prevent the overnight closure of our A&E. In fact, research suggests from the NHS nationally that trusts that have been put into special measures struggle to retain and recruit doctors. I'm not bothered in particular what labels are attached to any one organisation, but what I am bothered about is making a problem worse. And if the trust goes into special measures, and if doctors and nurses leave the trust, then those people who have dangerously and recklessly called for special measures should hang their heads in shame. Special measures also brings an increase in debt repayments. It also sees the employment of expensive NHS management consultants that come into an area and do very little to improve or turn around a trust. What we do need is a uniformed voice where we say to Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, and to the Prime Minister that we need some Brexit dividend. We were promised a Brexit dividend for our NHS, and what we need is that Brexit dividend for our NHS now and urgently. And it isn't just the NHS. We need a Brexit dividend for our adult social care services. Adult social care and the budgets attached to it has been decimated by this government, both from the Labour Council and the Conservative Council's point of view. And those apologists for this government who've done nothing at all to lobby a government for fair funding need to take their fair share of the responsibility for that. We also need a government-backed rescue plan which guarantees that our A&E will never, ever close. It cannot be right that the fastest growing town in the Midlands, serving an increasing population, is without its A&E. The arguments that my colleagues made a few decades ago to get a hospital are not just the same as today, they are stronger today. The arguments of getting a hospital a few decades ago were strong. The arguments to retain a fully functioning hospital are stronger. And we need this government to take notice of that fact. And just finally, a real appeal, I think, to our politicians in this town. Everybody I speak to in this town is really, really concerned about the overnight closure of our A&E. Sending a few letters off at the 11th hour isn't going to solve any problem, because only a fool will realise that the answer that they've been given over the last few months will be the same answer that they will be given to an 11th hour appeal. And to do otherwise is treating residents with contempt and treating them as if they are stupid. Residents know that in September last year, this council called upon neighbouring trusts to provide doctors, and we were called by some immoral for doing so. And the 11th hour appeal is too late, and too little and too late. So I do hope that we'll all be united at the march. I hope we've all signed the petition. I hope we've all promoting that petition in our communities, and I hope that everybody is doing all that they can in their power to prevent this overnight closure. We and I are not a member of the governing party. If we were, I would frog march councillors and health bosses into the health secretary's office and demand a deal. I'm not in that position, so I look to those people who are in that position, not to simply accept the word monitoring as some kind of breakthrough, but see that as an absolute pathetic response to an emergency situation. If this overnight closure goes ahead, I am genuinely concerned that people and children will be put at significant clinical risk by travelling to Wolverhampton and to Stoke. And I will not, and we will not rest until we have exhausted all that we can do to prevent that from happening. And if it does happen, then those who have sat on their backsides, had an under-the-radar campaign against their own government, can hang their heads in shame. Thank you very much. Councillor England.
I was one of those people 40 years ago. I was vice chair of the Hospital Action Committee. I didn't go, but we sent a deputation down to Westminster. We made the case for Telford, as you quite rightly said, on the basis that it was a new town, that it was a growing town, developing town. All those arguments that we made 40 years ago are magnified today because we're a bigger town, we're a growing town, fastest growth point in the West Midlands. So I think you're exactly right. Can I say in passing, I know this may be a little bit out of order, but I do think that our leader has led a good fight. I think he's done an excellent job, and that's not just me being a sycophant. That is a fact. This morning I attended the Regional Council of the GMB Union, of which I'm a member, and this issue was discussed, and those regional people from across the West Midlands were aghast to discover that the effect of closing our A&E will have an impact on New Cross, Dudley, Stoke-on-Trent. That is the effect, and as you quite rightly say, 80 children a month going out of county. And it's not just the children going out of county, it's all the care that goes with them. It's the family, because you can't leave a child in hospital on his own. It's the family, how do they get there, how do they get back, all those ramifications. We've also heard that if there are incidents Friday and Saturday night, and casualty is usually the focal point where the police are tied up. So Telford Police tied up in New Cross, looking after our residents. Telford and Wrekin ambulances tied up around the West Midlands. Where's our ambulances? They're over there, miles away, 30 odd miles away. Right? It's going to destroy more than just closing the A&E. It's going to have a major impact on people in this area and a major impact on people in other areas. Already, I think it was last weekend, we were told they were shipping people out of county. We haven't got the capacity now, so we're going to reduce the capacity. That is the appalling part of it. And I'll say finally, if ever there was a case for unity across the political divide, not just the political divide, businesses, people, communities, if ever there was the case for us to get together and work together to fight this closure, now is the time. Now, and this is what I'm saying, now is the time to bury hatchets, right, come together and help to make the case to save our A&E overnight.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, it's key that what the council seem to be doing, as Arnold said, the leaders led from the front on this in fighting for our hospital A&E not to close overnight. There is the march planned on the 4th of November. Hopefully people and councils are encouraging their residents and the community to come together and show their support for keeping the A&E open. And I appeal to Shropshire residents as well, and Parish residents really, to come and back the march, because it won't only be Telford residents that will be taken to Stoke or Wolverhampton when that A&E shuts. It will be children in Paris and Shropshire who will be taken past their local hospital in Shrewsbury and took to Stoke and Wolverhampton. The government, as we know, can do something about this, and it is those we need to appeal to. The MPs can do something about it. They can withdraw their support of this government and say, get those doctors, get those nurses into our hospital, because, you know, the underfunding of the NHS over quite a number of years, the fact that they try and push people into privatisation is always there to be seen. And now we're at a crisis point, because this A&E closure overnight in Telford will not just be an impact in Telford, it will be an impact in the West Midlands, as Arnold just said. And unfortunately, you could bring the NHS to its knees in the region by just this one closure, because of the number of patients that will be taken to other hospitals in the West Midlands. And that means people in the West Midlands hospital, they might not be able to get in to their own A&E, because there's ambulances outside from Telford or Shrewsbury or Powys. So this is a big issue for our town. It's a big issue for the conurbation, and we need to make sure the government do whatever they can to step in with this rescue plan that the leader and this cabinet and this council are calling for, to make sure that this A&E doesn't shut. And I urge anybody out there who worries about their children, their families, to be on the march on the 4th of November and show our voice as a collective, as unity to the people, to the government, and say enough is enough. Let's get these doctors, let's get these nurses, and let's put this rescue plan into operation.
Shirley?
Thank you. Yeah, it's getting down to the actual basics of ordinary families that need this hospital. We all know people who have got children that have that sort of care need the whole time. I have a local resident, he's a few doors away from me. Everybody in this room will most probably know Matthew Cooper. His parents have already been in touch with me. They are extremely worried. Any time Matthew will need to go into the hospital. The thought of that young man having to go all the way to Stoke when his local hospital isn't available, it just beggars belief. And I am very, very frustrated that I know in Shropshire we have 5 Tory MPs. Those 5 MPs could lobby this government. They have such a small majority. Those 5 MPs have a massive bargaining power. They need to be thinking of the whole of Shropshire. It's not just Telford that will be losing this A&E. As has already been said, the impact, it's on the whole of Shropshire, it's on the whole of the West Midlands. This isn't just about saving the A&E, it's about saving lives. That might sound like I'm scaremongering, but I am not. This is going to have a massive impact. So help save our A&E, and let's save some lives.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I'd like to speak from probably the most personal way. 10 years ago, 3 o'clock in the morning, heart attack, off to the A&E. Ironically, it was a Sikh that saved my life. And I had a quadruple heart bypass. Now, can I imagine my wife, 55 years, following the ambulance to Stoke, following the ambulance to New Cross, following the ambulance to Birmingham? You cannot. You've got to live it. And the two paramedics, one was Dave, he saw to me in the back of the ambulance, and Emma drove the ambulance. And she must have flew there, because she was at the A&E within 7 minutes. And the pain had gone. And this is the personal side of what is going to happen to everyone in this room who thinks that you're immortal. Forget it. I didn't smoke. I played golf. I played bowls. I do a wonderful garden, and I had a heart attack. I went down the pitch when I was 16, 10 years on a coalface, 14 years up rolling steel mill, 22 years with the army, serving Gurkha regiments on water supply, and I had an heart attack. Yeah, and people believe that they're never ever going to be on the dark side. You think your loved ones, you won't be on the dark side. You will, sooner or later. And I'm a nice chap, and I don't wish it on anyone. You know, I'd like to think I'm a very nice person, and I wouldn't. And I'm still having it. Look, there you are. That's what I'm still going through. But that's the fate, that the human being is so fragile that you talk about statistics, you talk about hospitals, you talk about this, that and the other. And funnily enough, Satnam, I said I've just come back from the Punjab. Where did you go? Karamuja? Jalandhar. Oh, that's my father's city. And I said, great, I've got somebody on the inside, you know, in my sense of humour. And this is what will happen to you. So when people in council make a statement, which one from the opposition did, and she said, oh, don't worry about it. If they close the A&E, you can always go to Wolverhampton. And that's when it did hit the fan, because I tell you what, I reared up on her like another person. It's not going to happen to you, is it? It is going to happen to you. There's more people in the pits died this side of the River Severn when the old Shrewsbury Infirmary was open than ever, and the steel mills. What is the matter with people that they do not appreciate what they've got and what they're having taken away? Because you will, believe me, there will come a dark side in your life, and you'll think, I hope it doesn't to anyone. But when it does, you will have I've got 4 sons, 6 foot guys, big guys, nice looking guys, fight a monkey in a dustbin, great guys. The youngest, when I came home, Mr. Leader, when I came home, I didn't know my left from my right for 2 years. So there you are, you know, I mean I cannot understand people trying to be clever. You will die, believe me, you'll die. Somebody will catch you up and you'll die. They'll get you, you know. But let's cut the odds down before they do.
Thanks, John. Lee?
Yeah, this is a lot of very valid points made, and we all know the impact that this will have on our community, and it frightens the life out of us all. But this is a manifestation of almost a decade of Conservative government's assault on the public sector.
Yeah.
And they started this on the basis that they wanted to deal with a national debt which stood at just under 1 trillion. It now stands under 2 trillion, which tells me actually it was never about the national debt. It was about an ideological driven assault on the state. And they've done it with the police, they've done it with the fire service, they've done it with the schools, they've done it with the public sector, they've done it with councils. They've taken £38,000 a day off us since 2010 when they came into power, and they've done it in the NHS. Now, we knew this was going on all along. We've sat meeting after meeting here, we encounter issue after issue on a day-by-day basis, and we just wondered at what point the public were going to realise. And actually they realised, because the manifestation, a very real and tangible manifestation of this assault and underfunding of the public services and the public sector has been the threatened closure of our local A&E. And that's made people wake up, actually. And now is a time for action. We know how the game works at government level. We're not as Sean said, we're not in government as a party, but the powers that a Secretary of State has got are immense. After all, we sent one to Brussels the other day to give a nod and a wink to Brussels and agree to £17 billion more to allegedly stay in the European Union for another year. So we know the power that they've got, and he has got the power through a phone call or a letter or an email to deliver what's required. Now, if he doesn't exercise that power, then, as Councillor Reynolds has said, the power then lies with the 5 Shropshire MPs. We've seen the power that the 10 DUP MPs got, which was worth £1 billion. Well, all the Shropshire MPs are asking for is a few nurses, a few doctors and a couple of quid to keep the A&E open. That's all they're asking for. It's not a great deal. But what have we seen instead? We've seen accusations from the Conservatives of scaremongering. On record, an elected member of this authority have accused us of tokenism. We've seen dead cats, we've seen diversionary tactics, we've seen delay, we've seen disappearance. By the MP for the Wrekin, we've seen what, in my opinion, is an absolute dereliction of duty. And I think it's time for all of those people who've got influence now to get their act together. Yeah. If the Secretary of State can't exercise his power with the NHS and make them do what is required, then they need to exercise that power, and they need to do it now. Now, the time for monitoring, for talking heads meetings, for soft letters that have already been sent and questions that have already been asked have gone. They need to act now, and they need to do it quickly.
No, sir.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes.
Hilda?
Yes, no. I've been a councillor for quite a long time, as all of you know. And I like Councillor England for the hospital we had down there. But I think in all the time I've been a councillor, I have never sat around a table discussing such a serious issue as we've got today. It really despairs me to think that, you know, we can't come together. It's our problem. It's all of us. We've got to fight together for this. Forget your politics. This is a serious matter, and I beg of you all to pull together and fight for this.
Thank you, Hilda. Any comments from the group leaders?
Yeah, I'd like to make some comments around it if I can. The first thing we need to do, I think, is pay tribute to the staff that have kept the A&E going under such difficult circumstances for a long time. They've been working their tails off, trying to put a sticking plaster on the A&E to get it going. Now, SAT have made it very clear all the way through this that it's not a question of cash, and it's been brought up here about what's paid in America. Well, America's a private healthcare system, of course, and the amount of money that they're paying there to attract doctors is immense, and it takes some competing with. I welcome any moves to try and get doctors here, certainly from India. I think that was well worth doing, and something that should be applauded. Anything that we can do to keep the A&E open and operating like this, and I mean anything, any letters or anything else that can be done, it has to be done. Now, the problems with the hospitals really started when they merged, and that was a problem. That was a backward step, although it was welcomed by this council at the time. I don't think that was very helpful at all. Now, when we fought this before, and I've said this before, we had an all-party campaign. We met regularly, we talked regularly. I made sure that opposition leaders and the groups were briefed on what was going on, and we decided the campaigns and we made our representations together. Now, clearly, that hasn't happened this time, and it is something that needs to be sorted out. And when you're continually attacking and making personal comments about people, that really doesn't help. Now, SATH knew about this problem 8 years ago. When we fought it, when we won it, the consultants, two of them that helped me fight it, came to our office afterwards. We sat there and talked it all through. And they say, you know, you've put a sticking plaster on this. It will not last. When we retire, you will not attract consultants and doctors to the A&Es as they're set up at the moment. And that is an absolute fact. So that existed 8 years ago. And you have to question what the heck SATH have been doing on this period of time to actually try and sort out this problem. Now, we've talked about burying the hatchet, and I'll be quite frank, I'd very much like to bury the hatchet. But if we are going to fight this, it has to be done together. And it has to be done reasonably together, as you say. There are a a number of politicians of all parties across here that can help, and rather than fragment what is done and the efforts to try and sort this situation out, it would be far better if that were pulled together. But to do that, and if you sit down and listen to what you've said and the way you've said it, it becomes very difficult to do it. But even so, I'm quite prepared to put that to one side for the sake of the A&E and to try and get this situation sorted out. This is critical. This is like a developing world health system that we've got here. It simply is not good enough to have our A&E removed. But at the same time, there are underlying problems with the hospitals. Now, we've heard John. I think you're a nice guy as well, John, funnily enough. Always thought that, as you probably well know. Now, I had a problem with the PRH. We've heard how great things are, and that was the women's and children's unit as it existed then. I nearly lost a child due to negligence at that hospital. And I had to follow a blue light ambulance to Shrewsbury for special care. That was during the birth. Actually, there were two lots of problems. Now, I didn't mind that. I just wanted my wife and child to be safe. And if that meant going to Shrewsbury to get the best care, and it was the best care, then I was quite, well, I wasn't happy, but I accepted that that's what needed to be done. And I'll say this about some of the issues that are going on at the PRH, and it's not just the A&E either, that there were problems in that maternity unit, which I followed up, and I'm glad to see it eventually came to the PRH where the most need was. But there are issues around that and the way it's operating. Now, I come back to SAF for part of this. It is the management that's been at fault. It is the management here that's caused this problem they've known about for 8 years and they haven't dealt with it. And they should have dealt with it. Well, you can tut all you wish, but that is so. And special measures is the system that is set up. Where there are doubts around management, and I suspect if I wanted to forecast, will they be put into special measures? Yes, I think they will on the management side of the hospital itself. And it's important that that is sorted out. However, what you say is quite right. We have a problem with A&E here right and now. And we need to do everything we possibly can to get that situation sorted out.
Thank you.
Now, my door...
Just quickly now, please.
My door is open. It's always been open. I don't recall very much contact from yourself around this for some considerable time. And if you want to fire back things about under-the-radar campaigns, as you know, they were yours. Now, we'll make a plea around the... no, actually, I sat there in the leader's office when he said it with council officers, so you're quite wrong there.
Huh?
If we want to do this together, let's do it together. And let's put aside all party political differences, let's work for the good of the borough, and let's try and sort this out.
Bill.
Yeah, I echo the issue. It's not just our PRH overnight closure, it's all the strains it's going to put on all neighbouring areas as well. And it's come to a head in a background of, you know, the government can argue they put more cash into the system, and they probably have, but demand has outstripped that. And, you know, we've got consultants shortages, not just here, but across the whole country. We've got fewer GPs. Is it 1,000 less than what we had 2 years ago? That's going to push, and probably has pushed more into A&E, all A&Es, because there aren't enough GPs to try and sort out the folks there. So there are undercurrents of what's going on. The other practical issue for me, just simply with an overnight closure, is, well, when really is the overnight closure going to start? Because typically if you go into an A&E, you've got a 4-hour waiting time at the moment. So if they're going to shut at 8, does that mean they're going to stop the queue at 4? Will they open up later or earlier? You know, you can just imagine the pressures. You turning up thinking, well, what time have I got to turn up to get into the A&E? Do I need to book my emergency in early? Or it beggars belief, really, as to how practically that's going to work. And you can just imagine the agonised scenes, can't you, where the confusion reigns. Oh, no, you've got to go. Oh, no, you can stay. And then people think, well, where am I going now then? Have I got to go to Wolverhampton? Have I got to go to... It's going to be awful. Absolutely blooming awful. So, in simple terms, you get our group's full support to back this campaign, as I'm sure you could expect to stop this overnight closure, because that it won't obviously stop at an overnight closure, it'll go elsewhere. But I welcome all attempts to try and bring stuff in. There's a colleague of ours at church, he's a doctor at the PRH, and I full well know the strain and pressures that they're under. And it is immense. And a lot of people don't want to work under those strains and pressures. So people are leaving because of the pressure they're under. So I echo what Andrew says. Our heart and our thanks must go out to those staff, consultants, doctors that are remaining at the PRH. And anybody who wants to join that team will be welcomed with open arms. They really would. So, yes, I'm all for this campaign.
Thank you, Bill. Just to finish this item off, I think that there is cause and effect here. So, of course, and we've done this numerous times over the last few weeks, praised our brilliant NHS staff. Indeed. But when I speak to NHS staff, like I do quite regularly, on the record, off the record, about various things at SAF, they talk about the fact that their pension has been worsened under this Conservative government. The nurse talked to me about the fact that their bursary has been replaced by a loan. They talked to me about the fact that their equipment that they used to use, which was really world-class equipment, has been downgraded to save money. So there are those people, of course, who will passionately praise staff, and there will be those people who passionately praise staff and mean it. And for me, words are quite cheap and quite easy, but it's how you support those words. And it's a bit like the council motion and about those MPs who signed a letter calling for a government-backed rescue plan. It's dead easy to sign a motion or to sign a letter, but it's like what actions you then follow through on. Andrew didn't use the word government once in what he said. Not once. He didn't use the word or words health secretary once in what he said. And people aren't silly in Telford Wrekin. They see what the Conservatives are trying to do. Over the last 8 years, undoubtedly there have been issues with management at the SAF, undoubtedly. But over the last 8 years, there has been a massive, aggressive assault on NHS funding. Over the last 8 years, there's been an aggressive assault on public sector spending in adult social care. There's been an assault in terms of allowing Commonwealth doctors and nurses to come to this country. And those are matters of fact. You can speak to people who know about this, and they will talk about the halving of the numbers of doctors coming to this country since 2010. This can be dealt with very, very quickly. All you need to do, Andrew, is get your Conservative MPs to pick the phone up.
To work together. You
pick
have
the phone
to
up.
Stop.
No,
this
Andrew,
sort of
you need to stop crying crocodile tears. And you need to pick up the phone.
I'm happy to do it.
You need to pick up the phone to your Conservative.
Really need to look at yourself
Andrew,
and your
no one
abilities
interrupted
to deal
you.
with this.
No one interrupted you.
Yes, you did.
No, we didn't, Andrew. No one interrupted you when you spoke.
You need to look at yourself and the way you're
Andrew,
approaching this.
Andrew, no one interrupted you when you spoke. All that needs to happen is for the Health Secretary to stop monitoring the situation and act. Lucy Allen and Nicola Lowry, and I pay tribute to Lucy Allen and Nicola Lowry for securing a meeting with the Health Secretary so quickly. But to walk out of that meeting with the only assurance that he was going to monitor the situation is weak. And 3 weeks on, if he has genuinely monitored the situation, then he will know about the huge escalation in the problem. A couple of days ago, as was mentioned, both the Princess Royal Hospital and the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital were on divert out of the county for adults. The other day, 90 ambulances arrived at the Princess Royal Hospital in a 24-hour period. If this government is monitoring the situation, they will know it's getting severe. And I hope it doesn't have to wait for a death in order for monitoring to stop and action to start. And overnight closures is an absolute terrifying reaction to austerity. And it is about austerity because cause and effect demonstrates that. I will work with you, Andrew. I will work with the Conservative MPs on this, together with other colleagues. but you have to be real about the power that you can exercise. As has already been mentioned, 10 DUP MPs got £1 billion of support.
Nothing to do with
all we need is 7 doctors.
Look, as you said, it's deeds rather than
Yes.
words, and that now hangs on your shoulders if you want to do this.
No, Andrew.
It really does.
Andrew, you're a fool.
What did you
You are a fool. If you are trying to present to people that this is about a Labour council...
I'm a fool.
Yes. Yes, you are.
Do you know,
If
you'll
you-
be out of short trousers
if-
soon. You ought to start acting like
my-
a leader,
well,
and really with the sort of
Andrew,
brevity
let's not
that
talk
that
about-
position has.
Andrew.
Now, insulting people like that and asking them to work with you.
Andrew,
Really,
I'm not the
you
one...
need to grow up
I'm
a
not the
little.
one who's trying to condescend someone based upon their age.
Try and
5
grow up,
Conservative
Sean.
MPs...
You cannot ask people to work with you on one hand and then start insulting them again
Andrew,
with the
you
other.
just said-
Life doesn't work like
Andrew,
that.
you
You
just-
really have to be more mature and try and get a grip of this situation and this council. You can't go on like this, Sean.
Andrew,
This is to the detriment of the whole borough.
Andrew,
Now,
you
it's a
are...
genuine offer.
It might be an inconvenient truth.
A genuine
It might be an
opportunity to
inconvenient
work with you.
truth,
And
but
this
you
is the
are...
sort of
Andrew,
response we get.
I'm not going to continue to allow you to interrupt. No one interrupted you when you
Well,
spoke.
At least,
There
you
are
know, you're
5
the leader of a council. Start acting
And you're
like
the
it.
and you're the leader of the opposition.
Then start acting like it, Sean. It's
and-
not good enough.
Andrew, stop being so childish and allow other people to
Dear,
speak.
dear, dear.
There are 5 Conservative MPs in this county.
Yeah, I know you've
there are
been-
5.
you've
There
been
is there is a
through all
there is a Conservative government in this county, and you're trying to pin the blame on the Labour council.
Look,
How ridiculous!
And this is how we work together.
There are
is it,
no
Sean?
recommendations against this report.
Is this how we work together?
Can I speak? That last 5 minutes of dialogue is not what we need in Telford and Wrekin Council. Right, I want us to draw a line under that and start working together for the people of Telford and Wrekin and the wider Westminster. Can we now draw a line under that and start working together, please? Thank you.
Let's get that meeting with the Health Secretary and let's lobby the Health Secretary together for a government-backed rescue plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to the item 5, which is Pride in our High Street, supporting businesses. Lee Carter.
Well, thank you, Leader. The decline in high streets and threats that they face across the country has been getting an ever higher profile over recent months, and those challenges are well documented. To name a few of them: changes in shopping habits, absent landlords, often remote and unconnected from their communities or the communities in which their retail premises sit. Local authorities with no real statutory powers to incentivise them to fill their premises. Premises that are not configured to meet modern day retail demands from both the trader and the shopper perspective. Unrealistically high expectations in terms of rent, and a business rate system that's a bit of a real rock and a hard place conundrum from the point of view that it's perceived as being highly unfair to businesses, particularly small and medium enterprise businesses. That is from time to time eased somewhat by short-term relief offered from the government. But let's not forget, in terms of business rates, at the same time, that's a tax and tax revenue that local authorities have been promised going forward. So a number of issues there. And these issues have affected the biggest retailers and the biggest shopping centres in the biggest towns and cities, so it's no surprise that they've had a detrimental impact on some of our borough high streets. So in 2015 we invested more than 1.5 million into borough high streets to help bring them back to life, and recognising the importance of them to Telford and Wrekin as a borough. At each stage of this initiative we have tried to mould the investment to reflect the findings of national studies into high streets. That first phase was completed in March of this year, 30 projects, and that unlocked nearly £500,000 in kind or in financial contributions. And one of the most unique initiatives that came about as a result of that was the Let's Go Quackers initiative. I didn't think it would ever float, but it did.
Or fly.
Or fly, yeah, fly even, yeah, that's a good F word for you, Richard. But that resulted in 32,000 being raised for local good causes, and it was fantastic in terms of how many people it got out and the interest that it provoked. In phase 2, we're investing a further £700,000 directly into our high streets to incentivise new businesses to locate into empty properties in the heart of our towns, We're allocating some money to improve and upgrade shop frontages. We're working with local towns and parishes in those areas, and that has unlocked a further 1 million by those investments, either earmarked or already committed to those by those bodies into our local high streets. The retail unit grant alone attracted 60 applications, and after thorough vetting of those business proposals, that's seen the first grant awarded recently to a company called Gems, who've relocated to Oaken Gates High Street. I can also announce as well, hot off the press, that there are 2 further grants that have been agreed and awarded. One for a premises in the square in Wellington, a second is to a new business again in Oaken Gates. The facade programme is now also underway. In addition to this, we're also piloting high street Wi-Fi, and we've also completed an engagement with 1,000 local young people, encouraging them to think about the future of our high streets, and that was done through the High Street Challenge. And such was the success of that programme and the quality of ideas put forward by local young people that we invested £40,000 into the winning ideas. One of those ideas will see an empty retail unit brought back to use as a retro shop in Wellington, and there'll also be an investment into ideas from the young people to improve the customer experience within Wellington Market, which again is another key asset to the borough. So this scheme is providing real tangible improvements and benefits to our local high street. But it's not solely of its own making. It also relies on other programmes and investments that this council has made, including the Telford 50 legacy funding, which has seen each of those borough towns invest £150,000 into a building of significance in each town. In Wellington, for instance, that's seen the rebirth of the Clifton under the guise of the Orbit, again in the square. And also vitally important to the success of this is the enforcement work being undertaken across the borough under the portfolio of Councillor Overton, the parking improvements that have been piloted in areas like Wellington, ongoing work to upgrade CCTV, the excellent work of our teams as a council who oversee the street cleansing, for instance, and the upgrade of LED lighting. So there's no silver bullet to this issue, but through small tangible steps we'll hopefully start to see some big improvements which will enhance our great borough towns. I think it's fair to say that all of those words sort of gloss over the massive amounts of hard work and the faith of councillors who supported the funding across the various pots for this from a borough level, but also those town and parish councillors who also stepped up to the plate and embraced this and have taken their fullest part in this. But also thanks to our staff as well, who've worked so hard to make this happen. It's easy to say thanks to those staff, but when it's been literally a routine of going street by street to look at empty properties, when it's been face to face with 60 applicants to a grant funding, that's a lot of graft and a lot of hard work. So I'd like to move the recommendation in 2.1, which is to note the progress, but also in 2.2, as I said, we mould the investment to fit patterns and national trends. 2.2 actually approves the inclusion of the Iron Bridge in the empty retail unit grant due to an increase of the vacant units in that high street. I'd like to move those recommendations.
Seconded by Councillor Overton. Richard, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's key, that the ever-changing direction of our high streets, especially with retail due to online purchases, etc. It's a moving feast, our borough towns. We've always focused, since this administration came in 2011, on our high streets. We've, the money we've put in there, because our borough towns are important, because they're not just places to shop, but they're places where people go for their chemists or their doctors. So people have to go there, and they need to have some worth of going there. And the investment that's being put in there, I mean, the grant to Gems is another one. I mean, we don't want to lose businesses in St George's, but the expansion that gives to that business to then grow and to get more people into Oaken Gate as well. And also, they was drowning under fabric really because of that the smallness of that retail premises. So these grants are welcome by businesses. It's welcome to get new premises into our borough towns. It's welcome to get more footfall there. And I just really think that we've got to keep always watching our borough towns as a whole and making sure that we keep committing ourselves to investing in our high streets and making them a worthwhile place for people to go, because as well as live, because living in our high streets is important, because then those shops and businesses have their own captive audience already there.
Hilda?
Yes, I welcome this report. I think it's excellent. And as Oaken Gates Town Council, we do appreciate those two businesses starting up there. Excellent. But to keep this up, it So now I must say my thanks to all who's been involved and working on this, and congratulations, because it's excellent what you're doing for the area.
Shirley?
Thank you. Yeah, very similar to Hilda. Actually, I'm delighted with the investment that's gone on. I know there have been some that weren't really that positive about the Pride programme, but we've seen some absolutely fantastic. In the first phase, all the ideas that came through, and in the second phase, in Open Gates itself, we've actually been able to welcome 2 businesses. I'm delighted my husband's opening the one on Saturday morning, and that has been a real boost for that area. And the second business, which obviously they're still renovating the premises, but as Councillor Overton says, the Gems, they are a family business, and they will be able to, for the first time, actually expand and make that a real security for their family. So I think it's the wider thing. It's not just, yes, it's great to have some shops within our area, but you've got to think of the families that trade and the families that come in. It actually provides a lot more, and they're actually going to go into a training base now, which they weren't able to do in their other shops, providing skills for other businesses, and that is really excellent. We're also lucky enough in Open Gates that we're going to be having the pilot of the Wi-Fi, and that has not only been received really, really well by residents, businesses are saying that as well. And with the change in the way people shop, that is actually a really good boost, because we can have shops coming into our borough towns and they're just using that shop really as a bit of a frontage, but with the Wi-Fi they can develop the internet business, which is what we really need to do to keep our towns really vibrant. So I think it's been an excellent programme. So I think it's well worth its weight in gold, and it's making more sustainability in our borough towns.
Excellent.
Yeah, I welcome the reports. I mean, I think we have to rethink what our high streets can provide, you know, with internet shopping, and the traditional way you used to buy things is changing. And I think one of the reports I've read about is where it's really helping is where you look at it mainly as a meeting place. I know when my parents used to go out shopping, it wasn't always what they bought. It got them out of the house, and they go all over the place with the bus passes and think, well, this is great, you know, we go to West Brom and go and get me lamb chops and go somewhere else. And then they go and have a bite to eat. And I think particularly with more mature residents, including myself, I had to then, I'm over 60, seating is vital. And so you often find that sometimes lacking, not in some of our areas, but seating is absolutely vital, because they need somewhere to perch. Greening them up, making them more attractive, so they're not necessarily shopping venues as such. They are, but people will go there for a coffee, they'll go for a tea, they'll go there to have a chat. I never forget going into the markets in Wellington, and people you'd bumped into from the village I was living in at the time. It wasn't just a shopping experience, it was meeting up with the neighbours and spending time there. And if you can make these places more convivial for that, I mean, we're doing really well. And you know, Wellington's got the new bus depot over the last few years, and free parking is still, even though people moan, it's been like the clappers, oh, you can't park in Wellington for free, I can't find a car parking space, which I can understand, but you try finding a free one in Shrewsbury. You try finding a free one in Birmingham. You find anywhere, if you can get into Birmingham with your car, you know, it's people come to our area because they enjoy the shopping experience, whether that's the town centre or the district centres. We've just got to make that experience, that meeting up with people, as friendly and as convivial as we can. So whether that's cafes and open air cafes, even in the middle of the winter, put your bobble hat on, it's fine. So let the snow come around, it's great. So yeah, I welcome that, but remember what these high streets are, they're meeting places. But yeah, I welcome the report.
Thank you, Bill. Andrew, do you just want to say something?
Yes, if I can. Actually, I agree with a lot.
Goodness
what
me.
you said, Bill, and what others have said about it. I mean, there are a lot of ideas about how we can reverse the fortunes of high street shops, such as improving shop frontages, grants for empty buildings, discounts on business rates, which hasn't been mentioned at all. I mean, business rates are crippling for retailers when they're trying to compete with online retailers such as Amazon, who are paying nowhere near the same sort of tax bill. However, the long-term trends in people's purchasing habits are now spending a lot more of their disposable income on leisure activities, less than buying goods. And what goods they do buy are increasingly bought online, as has been said. Now, I don't think that that's likely to be reversed by trying to prop up a struggling retailing sector on its own. I think we should start putting aside our obsession with shops and focus on bringing into our town centres more accommodation, as has been mentioned, and a range of different businesses as well. We should view retail shops as part of a thriving high street, not the sole purpose of it. I mean, this council, like many others, are in part to blame. It's planning policies which have favoured out-of-town shopping centres and developments over traditional town centres. I mean, those policies have had an adverse effect on the marked viability of traditional high streets in the borough and, of course, elsewhere. However, even these out-of-town shopping centres are now suffering themselves with the downturn in retail. Now, I do welcome money being invested into the high streets, in our high streets. And I, probably like Bill, look back with fondness on what our high streets used to be. And of course, at that time, a lot of people used to live above the shops, and it was a community in itself. So I think in many respects, while it's laudable what we're trying to do, this council's vision does need to be changed, and I would urge a change of direction. People need other reasons to visit our high streets, and we need to put aside our traditional views on what a high street is for. And I agree with what you said. They need to be attractive, there needs to be green spaces, but they do need other types of businesses in there, and we need to look at retail. And we probably need to look at reducing the amount of retail take available in some of the shops as well. In some of the borough towns. Because all that leaves is empty shops, when really we could be putting those to use and making vibrant centres out of them. So I would urge a rethink on what's being proposed at the moment.
Lee?
As I say, we've moulded the investment as the national trends come forward. I think Wellington is a good example. I can speak about that. I've got massive experience of what we've tried to do in Wellington. A partnership again. Let's be honest. You know, there's only limited amounts that we can do as a borough council. As I said earlier, we've had £38,000 a day taken off us since June 2010 in cuts. There's limited amounts to what we can do. But working in partnership with the Town Council in Wellington, we've adopted a plan there. We've reduced the retail footprint. We've encouraged more accommodation. We've used our powers where we can to get stalled sites moving, and we continue to do that. We're looking at the other towns where we can do that as well. A number of stalled sites that will come on board. And I think you might have misunderstood the report, Councillor, but actually you're right. You know, it's not just about retail. There's a certain type of retail that's attractive, the small business unit, the start-up business unit, the business that's just stepping out of their home, might be food production, etc., into a small unit. But some of the applications that we've had, or many of the applications that we've had, have come forward and have been approved. The 3 that I talked about, 2 of those aren't retail in the traditional sense, actually cafes, dessert shops. So I agree with you, and I think our intention reflects that. But as I said, this is an investment that we can mould as we go forward, and as demands and different trends come forward. I think the biggest thing about it is it's seen as a welcome development from those businesses who have held on in the high street, who've held on, who have struggled through. And in places like Wellington, Oaken Gates, Madeley, hopefully Iron Bridge now, they'll see that local authority is doing as much as it can to try and help, and so that those businesses can retain that foothold in the high street and thrive, because many of them are small family-owned businesses.
Just on, Kathy, just on the living above the shop type scheme, can you just update us on where we are in respect of that, and what pilots we've had in respect of that?
Yes, I mean, through the current programme, one of the uses of the grant can be to convert the upstairs of shop premises into living accommodation, so we're encouraging that to come forward. And indeed in Wellington, one of the grants that we'll be awarding hopefully soon is about the conversion of quite a large retail unit into a combination of living accommodation and shops. We have accommodated that within the current grant programme that we have.
Yeah. In terms of the powers, do we have any powers to force say for example a shop to be converted into accommodation?
I'm not aware that we have powers currently, but
no, and I think one of the challenges is always quite often the owners are distant, and being able to identify them and engage with them. I think it's certainly in terms of the planning side of things, we've challenged conservation areas in some of those areas to work with as well. But certainly we've been working alongside the planners, and I think there's a recognition, as everyone has spoken about, that it isn't just about the traditional retail shop anymore. It is about bringing other businesses in, and again, one of the schemes that's coming forward will be in a shop unit, but will be a different sort of business, and leisure opportunities, and as you say, that residential where we can bring it forward above shops, and the programme allows for that. So I think we're using as much of the flexibility that we can do.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that point? Different type of businesses. I've stated this in other forums. I advocate that you have ensure there is strong Wi-Fi, right? Because hybrid type businesses will have their shop front, right, which will, but also dealing online. It isn't one or the other. It is. It can be both, and I've advocated this for some time. And I've read about. I've also read about the fact that when you turn the upstairs into living premises, you provide living premises, but you have a living high street, and that reduces crime and all sorts of other opportunities because it's lit, it's lived in, right? So I think there's a double whammy. Well, not a double whammy, a double win there. Right? But I do push this thing about Wi-Fi and having hybrid businesses, not just all right. The hairdressers, you don't do that online, but other saleable goods you can and do. So yeah, that's my.
And just in terms of Wi-Fi, super fast Telford, obviously 98%. That obviously includes high streets and district centres, is it? Brilliant. Okay.
Pilot is looking at potential for plugging any gaps, but I think again a lot of the analysis there was showing that a lot of the public areas are covered by the existing provision, but where we can plug that and, as you say, support that change in the high street, then we will do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the spirit of cross-party working, I'd like to welcome Dane Kuczynski's campaign in respect of getting the Chancellor to reform business rates in his next budget to help high street businesses. I think one of the absolute challenges, though, is you can tax people like Amazon, but the real risk of taxing people like Amazon is they just pass on that cost to the consumer. And then all that happens is the consumer pays more. So I think the real challenge is how you reform business rates for high street retailers without then passing that burden of finance that to local authorities, because that's what often happens. Yeah. And so I think we should welcome that and add our name to it. And as I think Bill picked up on free parking, clearly that's something that we are absolutely committed to. I think Shropshire Council have got themselves in a bit of hot water in regards to that in recent times. Yes. Okay, that's been moved, it's been seconded. Everyone in favour? So everybody, thank you. We move on to item 6 then, which is supporting employment scheme. Councillor Ray Evans.
In spite of increasing cost pressures through ongoing budget reductions, the Council continues to seek out best practice in its employment practices and has set itself the challenge of becoming an exemplar employer for the borough. This new approach, which utilises a scheme budget from existing funds so that there's no financial cost to the services who provide the placements, will seek to support groups of individuals that often need additional help to secure meaningful employment. With approval, the scheme will operate as a pilot in this financial year, with a report coming back to Cabinet at the end of the financial year on progress and impact. Specifically, we're proposing to offer up to 5 paid work placements for adults with learning disabilities, up to 3 ring-fenced apprenticeships for care leavers, up to 5 supported internships for young people with education, health and care plans through a scheme operated by Telford College, and work placements for young people who are yet to start a career and adults returning to work after a career break. These are usually 1 to 2 weeks in length, and numbers will depend on demand and service capacity. There's clear evidence that with the right support, individuals from each of these groups can and will be successful in fulfilling their potential. We believe that this offer will provide the direct help that would enable them to take the first steps in doing so. In ensuring that this scheme is meaningful for its participants and enables our service managers to make the scheme work, we will take an asset-based approach to each placement. That is, each one will be built around the needs of the individual. We will provide good, effective training and support to both the participants and the managers. And we will use effective case management and tracking to understand whether the scheme is working. For example, by identifying early strains on placements that may lead to breakdown and taking necessary additional support. Finally, the impact of the scheme will be monitored and measured by a working group in a number of different ways and on a number of different levels. For the participants, we would expect them to build their self-confidence and the work skills and attitudes required for future employment. For the Council, this programme will enable the Council to achieve disability employer leadership status, which which is a national scheme run by the government. To do this, we will need to support and encourage other local employers to adopt similar schemes and approaches around recruitment and retention of people with disabilities. Finally, and ultimately, it will contribute to the delivery of the Council's wider objectives of supporting people to become independent and so reduce demand and reliance on services. Cabinet, it is my recommendation that the proposed supported employment scheme is approved.
Thank you, Ray. Do I have a seconder for that? Thanks, Richard. Thank you. I just want to say, Ray, thank you for your work on this, because you really have demonstrated strong leadership yourself to bring forward this programme of works and improvements, so I think that's excellent. Any comments from Cabinet members? Councillor Overton?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is excellent work. I mean, you know, we've always believed in aspiration, and this gives people aspiration. It also unlocks, as you said, Ray, the potential of people who think they've probably got no worth. I think that's, you know, right. They think that their learning difficulties or the reason they've been leaving care is something that holds them back, and we need to make sure that they don't feel held back. And the positives, you know, as someone who's always believed in employment through health and wellbeing when I was chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, is that employment gives so much better options for people. It gives them choices to make. It makes them feel worth. It makes them feel valued, and it also increases socialisation while you're at work. So the benefits of this scheme is really good. You know, as I said, you know, as I know that, you know, I know somebody who is a street champion who has learning difficulties, but he's got that work ethic that could be really valued in society if he was given the opportunity. So, you know, this is a great paper and one that we should all support.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments, Bill?
Yeah, I just wish you had loads more money to do this sort of thing with, because I'm thinking of all sorts of things. My own sister with severe learning difficulties who couldn't really hold a job down back in the 70s, and she ended up at a training scheme which was great because he gave her employment, he gave her sociability, he meant to get out of the house, he didn't drive my mother around the bend, and that was great. I'm also thinking of the experiments they've done in America with prisoners. I know this doesn't mention that, but you know, people come out of prison, and what's the worst thing that can happen? Because they can't find a job, so they reoffend. And you'll find a high proportion of prisoners are probably people with learning difficulties. They come in out of the armed services and they go into prison because they can't adjust to society. I know very often people are say, I can't be a hobby horse with this one. People can often say, oh, they should just go out and get a job. Well, some people find that first step terribly difficult, but once they've been nurtured and pushed a bit and given that first opportunity, then they find their feet and they can move on in society and make a positive role. So any steps that we can afford and can invest in to encourage, to nurture anyone to move from a period of unemployment, whether they've got learning difficulties or not, is great, because it gets them that self-respect and into society, and it breaks that culture, that cycle down of dependency, of low worth, of all these things that people can have without a job. And that we're all stressed out as we are then when they actually get into a job, but don't tell them that, no. But I think, no, it is really positive that they are encouraged to do this, and I wish you had more money to do it with.
Thank you. Andrew, did you indicate, sorry?
Yeah, just quickly, I thought actually this was a good initiative and good use of existing budgets. I was quite impressed with the content of it and the report itself. I think it's to be welcomed.
Thank you for that, Andrew. That's really nice to hear. And just to add to that, can I just finally say a big thank you to all of the officers and various groups and teams of people, and John, who have been involved in this, because there have been lots of different groups of people involved in this, and there will be in the future those people who take on a placement and support a person. It's an addition to their daily job.
Absolutely.
And you know, that's very praiseworthy, so thank you.
All those in favour? So everybody, thank you. Thanks, John. Councillor Watling is unfortunately unable to join us today, so just in terms of this report, just a slight change to how we normally do things. Sarah, would you mind just running through the report for us, please?
This report outlines our duty really to look back and provide a local account over the last 2 years of adult social care, and it describes our performance, it gives feedback on the use of resources, and it also takes experience of people who've used our services. You can see throughout the content of the report, we have included people with lived experience throughout the report. We've recently, in the last 12 months, developed a Making It Real board, which is a board co-chaired by Councillor Watlin and a person with lived experience, who's actually Mick, who wrote a piece for the report. What that's done is ensure that we as a department are looking at ourselves, are being challenged throughout our delivery of services for local people, and are using people's experience to further improve the services that we offer. This year's report is more engaging. People who've been on the board have been involved in designing it. As we move forward, we want to further improve on that engagement, so that we are really able to further develop the service in response to what local people actually determine is right for them.
Thank you, Sarah. Arnold?
Yeah, I'm pleased to speak to this. As you know, I had adult social care as a brief, so I still have a great interest in it. And you've already said some of what I was going to say, primarily that this is about people. You know, this is about people, this is about service users, this is about carers and family. Right? And they're mentioned throughout here. People who use services and carers expect to see, written by real people and families, choice and control so they can live life full and independent lives. Right? So I won't go on with the rest of the items I was going to pull out because you've already done it. What I did want to just, if I may, Leader, is if you go to page 43, I know the time's getting on.
Could be hot shots for half.
If you go to page 43, case study 1, right, Marie's 40 years old, lived in a residential home, etc. It goes on, second, third, fourth. She developed into making snacks, tidying her bedroom. Marie was then introduced to a supported living scheme, sharing with 2 people. Now, I just wanted to draw attention to that because that's what I call interdependence. People living in supported, so there's a reduced cost because there's 3 people supported by maybe 1 worker instead of 3 or 4. But working and living together, it then goes on to say they did things together, so their quality of life improved through this interdependence. Eventually, Marie supported making the decision. She moved from the residential home into supported living with a key to her own front door. That is what we're after, right? Helping people to live as independent as possible, sometimes with others for interdependence, so they can socialise and do things together. That's what ticks my boxes, and I'm very, very keen to support this.
Thank you very much. Lee?
Just excellent report. Obviously, I've worked with you quite a lot in terms of just the finance and all of this. Don't forget all this achievement and better outcomes, really impressive outcomes for people, is against a backdrop of massive financial pressures. You know, I think our last meeting, I was worried about you and your team falling over actually, because someone had just decided they might close an A&E and was going to stretch your social work resource all over the place. But no, really well done. It is about outcomes. We've got a statutory responsibility, obviously, but with that financial challenge, sometimes it's easy just to give up the ghost and do the easy thing. We've actually had to do a real lot of legwork and hard work to develop some of these initiatives to make good outcomes of people, and not just against that financial backdrop, well, partly driven by the financial backdrop, but also that uncertain care sector as well, where you've got provision that was perhaps suitable 10 years ago or 5 years ago even has fallen over because it's not suitable now, and somehow so a load of challenges. And I think when you're going through the metaphorical hell like that, it's important that you write things down, that you celebrate, and you actually understand that on the whole there's a good job being done, and most importantly better outcomes for people who need this care.
Thank you very much.
I move the report. Noted.
Yeah, just one moment. Bill?
My mum has gone through, is still going through care in Walsall, and my auntie did in Birmingham. And what struck my wife and I, who were the advocates for them because of their, dementia that they had, is that they could never be advocates for themselves. So what was important to us, and which was sometimes lacking because of simple cost cutting and that there isn't sufficient staff available, is the link, the vital link between the user and what they're getting from that service and the feedback to the authority. Because as often as these budgets outline on the The cost 61 million, 45 million of that is a purchasing budget, which means we've gone out and purchased that from other care groups and other agencies. And you think, well, if you're not careful, you think, oh, well, they're in a care home, we've done our bit. Well, obviously you haven't, and you recognise that. Because you've got to then go out and say, well, actually, what care are they getting? Is it fit for purpose? Is it what they need? And I think it is vital. I know the authority, because of cost-cutting measures, are having to think, well, do they still have that need? Can we look to save that cost? And as harsh as it sounds, it is necessary to do. But that link with the users is absolutely vital. I do want to mention one thing, though, because I'm an accountant, you'd say, well, wouldn't I? And you look at this budget and what we're trying to achieve at 61.5 million. And Andrew and I would support you wholeheartedly in trying to protect this budget, as we would wholeheartedly trying to protect the Children's Services budget. But there's that looming great cloud dangling over us. There's that Damocles sword saying, oh yes, but we've got to find £20 million worth of savings in the next 3 years. It's frightening. Well, do you believe that? It's frightening. How would you take £20 million off that? That would frighten you, wouldn't it, as an officer? It would frighten everybody, wouldn't it? But that's the sort of thing we're looking at. So, no, it's got to be protected by hook or by crook.
Andrew?
Again, I thought it was another good report and support it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say very briefly, I'm mindful of time. I went to meet the Making It Real board, and I think that it would be good for the other group leaders to go and meet the Making It Real board, because until you hear experiences firsthand about a whole raft of things, and I'm not going to say that they were saying anything the council was doing was particularly perfect. Of course they weren't, but until you actually listen to people who are living lives under certain benefits or certain regimes, you don't understand completely what they are going through. And I was really impressed with the Making It Real board, and I'm committed to go back every so often to go and speak to them. But it's a real asset, I think, to have that board holding our feet to the fire. But equally, I think they should be holding the feet to the fire of other decision makers centrally. I think, Bill, your point around an additional £30 million worth of cuts over the next couple of years, when we've already made £112 million worth of cuts, is scary. Scary. It's been proposed, it's been seconded. All those in favour? That's everybody. Thank you very much. Call the meeting to an end.